So just as a quick intro, initially I was interested in the idea of chatbots. And when Facebook came out at F8 and in 2016, there were a lot of bots that literally just were there to be chatting with you, and they didn't necessarily solve a goal. They weren't exactly that engaging. They were just kind of, bots are new, let's make a bot. So there's a lot of interest now in how to get a value from your bots, whether it's, can it help me do some sort of goal, meet a goal? Is it actually fun and engaging to talk to? Is it something that can actually keep me entertained, which I think is going to segue nicely with what we're going to learn from PullString? Or does it have a compelling AI background where instead of having to literally chat through very slowly and deliberately, can it have enough context and enough both NLP understanding and back-end service actually to get something done? So now there's going to be something of a kind of tightening in terms of what's going to be a successful bot. And you're going to have to fall in one or more of those camps to actually get anywhere now. So super excited to have PullString kind of tell us more about that storytelling bot and learn some more about that. So thank you, Oren.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. As I said before, my name is Oren Jacob, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of PullString. And I'm going to begin my talk by doing a slide 0 brag. We actually received a Conleo Gold on Friday for the PullString campaign that was part of Call of Duty last year as well, too, which I think is the first bot ever to be recognized. It's super awesome. Yeah, I want to go talk about that. And that's actually a great example of storytelling in the field as well, too. So those of you who haven't been up, I love Kit, but on Messenger to find Call of Duty there. You can check us on our projects there as well and play with those if you'd like to and see what that's like. So my talk today is more broadly, not about that specifically. I have 2 slides amongst the next deck that is about the company. That's a view of PullString running on a Mac. PullString is a platform for building computer conversation. You can download that at the website below. And my last slide about the company here is what you do in the platform. If you imagine Photoshop for making images digitally, PullString's for building bots and skills yourself. So you can sign up for that, download that, and start building. A knock-knock joke, for example, for your Alexa or Google Home if you'd like. And Kik, and Messenger, and Skype. We in fact support all major text platforms and voice platforms today. And if you're a gaming nerd and want to talk to your character in 3D VR, we support Unity too. That's cool. I support that. Or if you want to talk to your thermostat, we support IoT devices as well through devices if you want to. So we support any platform you want to talk or text to back and forth. With integrated machine learning and AI stuff, fully hosted cloud runtime. If you're a giant company, you want to have 20 people work on a bot together. That's cool. We support that as well too. Full analytics that wrap back into your content you write. You can extend it in different ways as well too. Text and voice form. That was the sales pitch on the talk. Super duper. I'll start my talk today with this is an image of Robert McKee. Unless you know who Robert McKee is. Anyone? Good, if you got stuff, great. I actually incorrectly cited him as already being passed away last time I gave this talk. I was corrected by Robert. He is not yet. Apologies to Robert McKee for that. Robert has been giving storytelling seminars in the field of screenwriting for not years, but decades of time. And it's most notably known for his book called Story, which I'll show you a picture of in a minute. You can all buy that on Amazon for whatever, 19 bucks. I'm going to pull a couple things from these talks. Almost any screenwriter who's done anything significant in the field, it's probably, I don't know, 80–90% in the past 2 or 3 decades, has gone through one of his 2 or 3 day long seminars. They'll drop about $2,000 to $3,000. You'll get 3 days in a Marriott hotel with him going at you, all 100 of his closest friends sitting around. And he's a very emotional person who talks about story, how to construct story. I'm going to cite 2 quotes here. True character is revealed in the choices a human makes under pressure. The important part there. The deeper the revelation, the truer the choice of the character's essential nature. When one engages another character, whether that's an actual person like you sitting in the front row or you in the back row, or watching a film, or in a live feed, or texting or chatting with the bot or a skill back and forth, you're engaged in conversation both ways. And we make a lot of assumptions about who we're talking to, whether texting, trying to find a new date for tonight in New York, or not a date, or who am I going to go to the show with or not, back and forth, will you say yes or not? You're reading a lot into what's said back and forth. And this talk really is about that, the subjects in the context of conversation, and what's revealed to us through conversation. Here's the book that you can get. There's a picture of the cover here. See all the Amazon if you want. It's about 600–800 pages deep. It's a great read. It's fun reading. It's not like super academic, but will give you a sense of structure of storytelling in a formal sense. And to expand on that pressure point as well too, pressure is essential people in this question now as well. Choices made when nothing's at risk mean very little. Character tells truth in a situation where a lie would mean nothing strikes as trivial and the moment expresses nothing interesting. This is the case when you ask Siri what the weather is. 78 degrees. Okay, that was easy to do. But the other case is much more interesting. The same character system telling the truth when a lie would save his life, and we sense that honesty is at the core of his nature. Hey Siri, where are my kids now? Bunk bunk. Well, that's Wikipedia. Wikipedia. That answer is a redirect in the wrong place. When you ask a bot or a skill a thing it can't understand back, how it handles the error condition is that bot or skill under duress. You stressed that thing you brought to market in a way that can't respond properly. How you handle that? Do you redirect back to the conversation you can talk about? Do you get punt and ask with Wikipedia? It's a terrible answer to that question. Or do you offer the wrong answer, even worse as well too? That's the point at which, when what we're designing in this room, and who here, by the way, has designed a bot or skill or a Google Home action or anything? Raise your hand. Okay. Keep your hands up for a second. Who else has worked on a project involving something like that? Any other people? Okay. Hands down, great. Who has never done any of this stuff at all? Oh, good. Mix and mix. All right. Cool. All right. This is also the error condition here, where, for example, you put in the wrong input into a web form, you answer a question incorrectly in a mobile app properly, and you have to get an error message back out. In the error condition, that is the point in which true character is most revealed, and it's why that's one of the most important places from a design perspective to look and see what we're crafting, and make sure we're communicating what we intend to. That's a critical point of this whole talk. There's the key. That's the audience you'd otherwise be in when there's big seminars, which is fun to go to. Because he goes to New York once, twice a year as well too. Because by you should check him out. He's great. But I'll say the person who goes by you should talk today. Next slide. Here we go. So the definition of conversation, very casually, an informal exchange of ideas by spoken word. Next slide. Two people talking back and forth using natural language. A little nerdier now for a second. Those of you, anybody here have friends or relatives who use ASL? You sign? Okay. That also counts as language as well too. And what's interesting about ASL, my brother happens to know, is when using sign language or spoken North American normative English, as I'm trying to today. Both of those things have accents. Both of those things have emphasis. Both of those things speak unique to geography. You can tell a signer from Southern California from a signer from New York very directly as you can a speaker as well too, it turns out. That's true of language in general, broadly speaking. And in computer conversation, we're just swapping out one of those people with a fancy computer on the side. We're otherwise trying to make sure we maintain the impact and effect of all the elements of conversation, which are vocal and audio, me talking to you, gestural, as I move back and forth, my body posture, my tone, mood, and style, my prosody in my speech, which is how high I go, up to Miss Piggy's register down here, up there, or if I stay this flat, like I'm talking like Siri, and go loud or go quiet. Those things all affect how we communicate back and forth, and are part of what we have to design in the field. We cannot separate having a conversation from thinking about whom we're having that with. Those things come intimately tied together. I think one of the important points often missed in this field is that the dialogue that you create, the intents that you craft, the fidelity with which you respond back is you designing a character, speaking back to the audience that you've engaged in your body or skill back and forth. And we will contemplate as an audience who that character is, what they stand for. Some examples. No, I am your father. Who knows this quote? It should be easy to do. That's fair, right? To be or not to be. Reference Hamlet, Act 3. I have a dream. I have Martin Luther King, as well too. I'm sorry, David, Brad, I can't do that. So these quotes come up. I believe for most of you, hopefully raise your hand if you'll recognize themselves if they were here, by the way. Yeah, for sure. Okay. How about, there's Hal for you. Mommy! That'd be my kids. But I'm sure that's probably true for your kids if you have kids. Or daddy, as the case may be. And we learn about each other through the use of language. I pick up the iceberg image here because it is both how we communicate on the surface and below the surface in both subtext and context that communicates in language, broadly speaking. Forward. I did happen to work on this film, so I put this up here because I was at Pixar for many years before coming to start PullString. So I'm using this one as a personal reference. But personification, a theme common in every Pixar film ever made, because humans don't talk, but fish and toys and cars do, is a quality we apply to well, bots and skills generally. So your app, bot or skill, has a character and a backstory and a motivation, tone, mood, and style. And it has that whether you want it to or not, because everything we talk to also has that. Because we're all talking to each other all the time. And all of us have that as well too. If you don't design it and deliver it, people will still assign one to your action, app, bot, or skill, whether you want to or not. This is a call to compel us to design in the space and think very carefully about the dialogue that we write, the intents that we craft, and how we respond back in the context that we build often skills in. That's good news and bad news. Let's talk about both sides of this coin now for a second. The good side is personification will generally help you because the audience will personalize and invest in something that they have a hand in creating themselves, conscious or unconsciously. That means people will tend to connect to things that are crafted in language, because we language ourselves talk to each other. That's the positive side. The bummer is that if you get that wrong, or don't contemplate it at all, and don't spend time crafting that, you run the risk of people projecting motivations, personality traits, and qualities onto your app, bot, skill, or brand, as the case may be, that you may or may not want associated with them. That leaves you out of control. As a person building something and wanting to express the design advocacy, abdicating control over the tone, mood, and style of your brand, your bot, your skill, or your action, is not a thing typically designers want to do. You want to stay in control of that to make sure that if you're Virgin Atlantic or Lufthansa or United or Delta or JetBlue, I'm just picking airlines because I'm going to talk about, I was on one yesterday. They're all very, very different, or even more vibrant, Uber versus Lyft versus New York taxis. Those three things are way not the same. And if you're not contemplating how you're designing each one of those three experiences in computer conversation, you may quite cross over them quite directly. That would not make sense. So, adding to that. Already covered that. Oh, the analogy here, by the way, is if you don't design those things, it's equivalent to giving your user a choice of the colors and location of your buttons in your GUI. Those of you who are graphic designers in the web or mobile space. You would never do that. But folks who only consider, I'm trying to respond back just to the question they're asking my bot, without ever considering what the dialogue is, are effectively saying that. They're allowing the user themselves to press into your design whenever they want to, which is kind of nuts when you consider that from a web design point of view. Google controls the color blue of the Google input dialog very carefully on its homepage, to an extreme degree for a reason. So, we've got some foundations of design in computer conversation now. One can kind of broadly think of the field of computer conversation, kind of like interactive screenwriting. Now, the interesting thing about it is, well, we, as people who create Alexa skills, Google Home Actions, or bot-centric or Messenger, we're designing lines 1, 3, 5, and 7, what the bot says outbound. We have no control over lines 2, 4, 6, and 8, what users and audiences say back to us. So it's as if you're writing half a screenplay with the half you're doing interleaved to every other line, and the other half are not yours, and can be actually anything. Language has very few, if any, constraints on, basically no constraints on it at all. We have to accommodate that in the design process. That suggests that skill actually comes from two places, and I want to make that point now directly. One of that is the field of traditional screenwriting, poetry, prose, the art of creating character and story, the linear narrative arts. Some of you hopefully got a 5 in the AP English test in high school. Some of you hopefully have a history degree. Some of you hopefully have written fiction or nonfiction or poetry or prose. That side of the party comes to play in this field full frontal. And so does the other side, which actually comes from the field of interactive design, which you find, there we go, in gaming, web mobile design, and the art of engagement and retention, the interactive arts, probably speaking. The field of creating bots and skills actually is a formal blend of these two sides. And I find that a lot of folks in this space will talk to heavily this side or the other side. I think they're both lying. It involves both these things in equal measure. In successful projects, your point you opened up with, what's being successful in the field today, consider both of these sides equally and with fair weight. So I want to talk about three sort of themes in the space now. Fidelity of conversation, the agency of bots, how much they offer themselves and decide themselves, and creativity in the area too. And we'll get into more specifics about bots directly. So the point of fidelity, computer conversation is always adjacent to real life, full fidelity human conversation. The examples here, when I'm talking at my house at dinner with Alexa or Google Home, my kids are at the table as well too. So we're having a dinner discussion amongst the 5 of us back and forth. And then of course one of my kids will say, Alexa, please play Hamilton again. We'll like it, thanks. Alexa off, Alexa, please play Hamilton, Alexa off. And back to my kids and debating whether they're listening to or not. That discussion is interleaved vocally amongst the 5 of us talking together. Messenger, Kick, Telegram, and Skype are platforms full of hundreds of millions of all of us testing each other all the time, and then your bot cannibals and that's equal too. You're texting in the bot and Kit or Messenger back and forth. Every one of your other friends in groups of single form are all around that before and after. Right now, the bot's in the middle of that as well too. So the judging of adjacency is always against what actual people are saying or texting back to you all the time, always. You're co-located inside your messaging apps that way, and you're stuck in the living room or the kitchen, talking like your Google Home or Cortana or your, I guess, HomePod, that's for Apple as well too, in the same way as well too. That's a super important agenda because that's really not the case when it comes to web design and mobile design. Those things tend to go for singular. And it's also not the case commonly in video game design. You're typically playing by yourself on your phone, sitting on the subway, or perhaps in your Xbox, whatever, at home on a giant screen, nerding out. You may have a LAN party going on if you're old school, and then you have a couple of kids hanging around with laptops in the same space, but that's unusual and was coordinated mom and dad minivans. Like, that's not a common thing to do in this country anymore. So I comment on that because that design consideration is mostly missed, and it's the way we're all, whether you want to be or not, judged on the quality we build in space. Because we're next to actually humans talking back and forth all the time. Agency. So how much can the bot decide to say itself? I claim that synthetic, autonomous, emergent personality is hopelessly not sufficient right now today. So imagine that you can generatively, algorithmically create character and bring that forward, which is nowhere close to human fidelity today. We'll get there at some point, but that's maybe 2025 and going on farther. But is that a problem? Well, that depends. I said it depends because made-up characters that are crafted and designed have actually been developed for quite a long time. Notice the Game of Thrones fan going back there. So here's a cosplayer. Don't raise your hands. Okay. The world of fiction suggests that specifically crafted characters and design behavior can be as or more effective because they can be created to match situations and outcomes they're needed for. There's a follow-on example of that over here. Any Stormtrooper parade should be evidence enough that who here's been in a Star Wars parade? I have. That's proud, right? Here we go. It's Pride Week. Is that okay? That's remarkable that a 1977 sci-fi film that was supposed to be a toss out for 20th Century Fox became the most significant piece of sci-fi ever done, and now we're dressing up as Stormtroopers doing full parades in them, which I think is crazy sauce. But the creativity on the side here, am I a computer scientist, am I a writer, am I one or the other? Well, those things are both very creative endeavors. They both contribute to the field, but they're different. And so I'm here to not make a claim that one or the other are better or right. They are both needed for this field, and both at a 10 out of 10 scale. Pull us off right. These both contribute, broadly speaking, and it depends on what you're trying to do. I won't put out for Steve Jobs' quote, creativity is just making things. That's a bit of an understatement, I think, for Steve, but I like that quote. So getting more specific to the field now. So content, intent, and context. Three sort of concepts, that's a lot of C's. Three ideas that we all need to think about actually building bots and skills. Four. Keyboards, mice, and touchscreens are super high precision, high accuracy, and unambiguous. They're a very tiny aperture. You get back, I press the shift key. You get back, I touch the screen in this XY coordinate. And what you get back is highly reliable. When you press the shift key, or I press the next arrow key, the slide with some Wi-Fi delay will advance, broadly speaking. That small aperture is quite the opposite in language. Language is hugely imprecise, it is very inaccurate, it's ambiguous with near infinite aperture. But therefore, it can be shockingly efficient. Pick two words very quickly come to mind. I'll go with these two obvious ones. Love and hate mean a whole lot things to a lot of people in this room, individually, personally, religiously, politically, family-wise. They carry tremendous weight for each one of us as individuals. But again, it's just 4 characters on the screen here, very small. And that makes the use of language in the computer science fields highly different than mobile app design, web design, and other things too. Because language is so broad, in fact, it is as broad as the human condition itself. We invented language to describe our own circumstance. This slide is funny because it's just funny pictures. I like this up here. But awkward as a word is for me suggesting looking at the picture for a second. Suggests that we, if we think that's a funny, awkward picture, can make the analogy between this simian and a human taking a selfie with a goofy smile, but it's an ape, not a human. How does he have a camera? So why would that be awkward given the look in his face? Because I understand that you might look awkward and you might not, given how I understand faces. I've seen them all my life as well too. That all piles into that. That one word there, that's a tremendous amount of information packed in a super dense space. Awkward. while funny and appealing. But to communicate that through a touch or text-based interface is much more difficult to do than it is with a simple word. As the fun side. So we invented a language to communicate the human condition, and all of its complexity, ambiguity, and subtlety, set up the design principles that we can use ourselves to build better tools and better bots and skills in market directly. So content and intent. Content is what your bot says. Intent is what the user says back to you and your understanding of it. So in a conversation, there are two parties. I'm speaking to you. Hi, you say hi back. So when you said hi back, you understood I was greeting you and said hi to you, presumably. I was not going to mug you and steal your phone. And I said hi back, I shook my hands. So I said hi. The intent was friendly gesture. You responded with hi. I said, oh, you're a nice guy, back and forth. You need both of those things. A lot of folks in this field, especially technology giants, and I'll throw all 5 horsemen under the bus now, Facebook, Google, Apple, Microsoft, and Amazon do a lot of focus on intent recognition. That is API.ai, Wait.ai, Lewis.ai, Lex, IBM Watson, all those various APIs you can use in general and sit there. That's super important. It's exactly half the problem. A lot of people think that is the whole problem. It's not. If you only contemplate understanding, you have to consider what you're saying back in equal measures. Those two things are both what makes up a conversation. Otherwise, it would be a monologue. Actually have a conversation, you must have both people understanding reacting back and forth. I recommend all of you be focused on both of those things equally. So if you're stuck in a project working heavily 90-10 on one side or the other, I would take a look at what you're doing, broadly speaking, and make sure you haven't diminished one side, either understand really poorly or answer back really poorly. Both are bad things to do. On the next one. Iteration and creative control. Iteration time is the measurement of creative expressivity. How fast can I try a thing out, see it, talk back and forth to it, does it work or not, come back and try it again. And when you're working in Photoshop, that's paint, undo, paint, undo, paint, undo, which is usually fast, at least it is today, it wasn't 20 years ago. The more times I can try a thing, the better if I can make it. Our tools today are not sufficient in this regard. It's often code, 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 compile, push out to web services, try to chat, didn't work. Reading another might as well too. That loop can take 5 minutes, it can take actually an hour, it can take days sometimes, depending on how you're working and where you're working, broadly speaking. So one chooses the method of working and designing tools, which is what we do with PullString. That is a critical, fundamental consideration. It's how fast can I attempt a thing. If I say this in a knock-knock joke, and the user answers back with this, what's the punchline? Try it out, dumb joke, try again. Writers want to work really fast. And we, in this room, are taking over part of that into our world, building bots and building skills. Another important consideration here, talk about, is predictability. From the people who are intent-focused nerds, they will often comment about, well, the intent didn't match what you do to fix it, give it more data, we'll do some more machine learning on it to make it better. But what data to make it better in what way? How much data, where do I get it? And how will things change if I add that data? Are all lots of questions that are most often unanswered in this field. I think that's terrible news. Black boxes suck in the creative process. And I'm not, really nerds in the audience here, I'm not speaking about linearity. I'm speaking about predictability. So I'll use the example here of riding a bicycle. Thanks to the slide back here. If I take a bike and get off of it, I actually went to one in Roseville Park today. The weather was gorgeous in New York. I love springtime here. This week is great. And I took my bike and I got off it and I shoved the seat down the street. What would the bike do? It what? It'd roll for a while and then it will fall. Okay. Do you know why it rolls for a while? Does anybody here, trick question, did anybody here describe to me in closed form equations of motion why that bike rolls forward? Does anybody know a professor at a university on Earth today who can describe that to me? No, it's actually not a solved problem in mechanics today. There are lots of considerations about gyroscopic motion, oscillation, inverse pendulums, and all kinds of fun stuff angular momentum. But the actual closed form solution to a bicycle not ridden, shoved seat, why does that stay upright, is not well understood. But yet, here can ride a bicycle. All hands up, come on. Really? Hands up. Back row, hands up. There we go, okay. We learn that by a mental mapping of what we do sitting on a bike, pedaling, and balancing ourselves. And the reverse action of leaning out of a turn and throwing you forward, you get as a 4, 6, 8, or 10-year-old. You understand it. That is a highly nonlinear system. But yet it's predictable. The human mind is exceptional at predictable systems, linear or not. All I ask for machine learning intents is to move toward a more predictable model. Because when you add data to a machine learning intent and it now overmatches undermatches or matches differently over time, my brain explodes all over my bot because I'm not sure how to handle what happened with the data attitudes. Can I pull that back out now and revert the data set? Maybe you can, depending on the system. That's a terrible thing to have in our field. So I've very strongly advocated for predictability in the basic tools we use, and try to build those implementation as best as we can. It's a broad claim for the field in general. Context is a word that's used a lot in this field. But I want to talk about this now in a specific sense. Context is a mental scaffolding we in our technology use to manage complexity. Conversation is very complicated. In fact, as complicated as the human condition itself can be in some cases. It can build really complex thoughts. And context in this field is made up of both what you say back, content, the understanding of it, intent. How those two things come together in the flow of your design. Keeping those two things as close as possible is a good thing to do. If over here is a list of all the dialogue responses I have, and over here is a list of all the intents I can recognize, who here has worked on a bot project where all your dialogue was in an Excel file or a Google Doc? Yeah, hands, there we go, okay, If you're doing that separate from your intents over here, how could you possibly understand these things working together? Right? When you design a video game, you work in Unity or Unreal or pick your favorite game engine. All the pieces you need are right there in front of you. When you're working in Photoshop, your foreground, midground, and background are all right there as different layers. You're not foreground, then midground, then background. Well, how does that go over that? And you're doing this the whole time. That's crazy sauce. So putting those together into the tools we use and how we design and build things is very important to do because it gives us a chance to build complex things. You need that context to be able to build complex conversation. Knock-on jokes are easy. They're 5 lines. You can ship them all the time you want. Rochambeau is easy too. I can build that bot as well. When you're trying to build legitimate, high fidelity, reaching for human fidelity conversation, that's a different proposition. And having to keep those elements together in your tools is important to do. I want to make the observation that conversation is actually often piecewise linear. What I mean by that is, we'll chat about pizza for a while, then about going on the subway, then about the meetup tonight, then back to pizza. So 3 or 4 turns in pizza, and then subway, then the meetup. Those sections follow each other. The topic changes are abrupt. Hey, do you hear that taxi cab outside? Is he honking for you? Are you hungry? Where are my kids? As non sequiturs come out, we do have to design for those, and those are the abrupt things that make it piecewise and not continuous across. So accommodating that and sudden topic changes do happen in real life in conversation and often wrap back to where you are. It's an important design sort of structure you can see in conversation commonly used. So with all those things out there now, I presented some conundrums, and I want to pick up like the one I want to put on the balancing act is sort of the most important one I think to balance. And it's a tricky one, which is that the tension inside a personality. The more personality you offer, the more you will engage and delight users. Often the more memorable you'll be. Vader example here. It's Yoda. Kermit the Frog, Miss Piggy. But at the same time, the more personality you offer, the more you polarize a segment of your audience. Without raising hands, if I just say the next 2 words, Trump, Clinton, I have, or 5248, the country smack down the middle effectively.
Not the city.
I was being dead neutral on this. I'm not trying to throw a but yes, thank you. Go New York. Well done, New York. Yeah. California's with you guys. But in that agenda, it's important to note that those personalities are highly memorable, super engaging, very retentive, all the qualities you want as a designer in this field. If I could only build a character that vibrant, people would keep wanting to talk about before and after, good or bad or ugly. Like those names bring up so much. Could I create something of that level of compulsion to compel people to want to talk to me? If you do and take a vision that far out, you probably figure out it's well, gosh, I can't do that because I'm kicking out hundreds of people on a platform. I don't want to lose half of them. Like that's not sensible either. So a designer, you can't chop out your audience off. There's a balancing act that occurs here in this tense place. This is particularly true of brands. Picking major news organizations here in town, the New York Times, CNN, down south, the Washington Post. You can think of 20 others in a second. The farther those folks go into a particular tone, mood, and style, more of their audience will be shed, but the more vibrant they will become. And so where do you sit on that spectrum? That's really tough. The best answer I have for that is actually to contemplate a plurality of personalities, which can get you close to the majority of your audience, but not just one voice. If you decide to go for an average personality, which a lot of people, especially in technology giants and companies, try to do, the problem here is the example here. If I went to YouTube and I pulled down every cat video ever uploaded, and I algorithmically machine learned on those things to build the average cat video of them all, and put that cat video up, that would be the definition of the most boring cat video ever made. That would be the blunt average of all of them. So you can't take Vader and Khan and blend them together and make some other new villain. That's not how this works. So an average of a thing is by its definition a regression to the mean. And personality is interesting because it is specific. It is not of the mean. So in that place, we all suffer as designers in our lives. But as you decide how far on the spectrum to go or not, I hopefully give you some thoughts about how to do that in your requirements. And with that, I think I'll get to questions next. I think. Yeah. So you can now start building out today. And I want to thank you for your time. Do you want to take a couple of questions right now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, if you watch the clock then.
Yeah.
Okay. Happy to take a couple of questions. Folks want to talk about some more things in detail. Over here.
You talked about an average bot, your last slide.
Yeah.
And I work for a pretty big consumer products good company. And there's that fear of being too creative where it might, cause the brand some issues. How do you balance that where you're looking to launch a bot where you don't want to get over the top, but you might create something that's pretty dull and people don't want to use it?
I guess on the vector of like too diminished and over the top is also like inauthentic, authentic, or like different things. I think being true to that brand and that voice is important to do. Being extreme for the purpose of provocation is not helpful. You wouldn't typically do that in a TV ad or radio advertisement either, or in your print ads, right? But if you look at different brands of toilet paper or different brands of milk or other common consumer packaged goods, different cookies, how Doritos presents and Tostitos presents are different and are specific to those brands, but aren't taken to an extreme point of being offensive. Okay. So finding the language that is true to what you're trying to get across. Cosmetics, which is a lot of big companies here in New York in that field in general, have an amazing amount of effort spent in differentiating branding for different market segments and demographics and use cases, broadly speaking. And being true to that, I think, is quite important. But just taking things to an extreme place becomes absurd and doesn't work right. So it's not a matter of picking language that's farther reaching. It's just being true to what that brand really is about. Did that help at all?
Yes.
Yeah. There's a question over here. Okay.
I tried a couple of your bots on Skype.
Oh, cool.
And I noticed they don't...
Doctor Who, Heston?
Exactly.
Oh, great.
And they don't answer any questions. And then I had my son try them and he killed them with emojis. So my question to...
Emojis?
Yeah, he was just doing smiles, arms, just fun stuff. They did not react. So my question to you is, given that UI has, language like HTML,
yeah.
and you can put like different cascading style sheets and do different UI magic on the same exact logic, do you see this field going in the same direction ever, where you train your bots to clearly understand and respond to the essence of the conversation, and then you put character on top?
So there are a couple things there.
Yeah.
So yes, you can build responses to emoji today. Some bots do that, some don't. Depends on the brand and the character. We have some that actually work only in emoji. We have full emoji-based competition people who built in PullString and gotten quite large, actually on Skype. Emoji bots built in PullString, and you can only emoji itself back and forth if you want forever. So that can be done today. Whether Doctor Who is a particular character should respond to emoji or not is a different question. And he is a character from the design considerations of that particular brand owner may or may not have decided. I don't want to speak to them specifically, but they may have decided that question for that particular character themselves. So that's two of the questions. Crawling back to another one then. Should a bot respond to anything? I think strongly no. I can't respond to anything. You expect that of no other human in your life. Not even Siri can do that either, nor should it. If something can respond to anything you asked it, it's also become this all-knowing being that understands everything you've asked. And it asks what my kids are. Nothing will ever answer ever, except what? If she's home, which she's not, she's here, so she won't leave. So that request people say, I trudge about by asking the question. Sure, that's fine. I can do that to anybody in this room in a second too, but I'm not sure that's really constructed, because if you're in the fiction of Doctor Who, trying to be a science fiction, time-traveling, British accented pseudo-hero, then that's sort of fiction you're playing in. Like asking Vader about the Trump election isn't constructive. Like he's talking about the Death Star model. So, I don't know if that makes sense or not, but how we handle the error case there is more interesting. If we handle that badly, we should make it better. But I don't think the Dr. Who should answer anything you could ask.
Okay.
Yeah, front.
So you mentioned a plurality of personalities.
Yeah.
Is that literally you analyze the user and try to like match it and segment it, or do you just jump back and forth? And how do you do that without being manic and strange?
That time is more aimed at folks trying to build really broadly general purpose things. So let's say you're trying to build Siri or Alexa or Cortana or Google Assistant. In that case, or M if you're at Facebook, your audience is like plus 2 billion is what you reach for. And to get that broad, if those 5 personal assistants will differentiate farther over time because they will have to attract differentiated audiences, or else they'll be the same type of each other. As they do that, they will begin to shed their audience as well too, which they will not like. So having a plurality is one of the advocacies. The other part of the question was, will you blend between them, like live and runtime? I think it's totally fair that you speak to a different attitude-based voice engagement in your car in different countries. In fact, that happens today. So when you're buying a Toyota or Mercedes-Benz in different parts of the world, you get a different system in your car based on that particular culture, what the designers believe is best for that geographic location. And when you move that car across the Atlantic, it gets weird on the far side. So we already differentiate. The voices for Siri are in different geographies already today. And might that adapt to who you are based on your responses back? Totally, I can see that happening, yes. But you would build those things differently. It's not this, doing one thing that moves in amongst itself versus different things. I think that we'll be selecting amongst different ones over time, I think. In my opinion. Over here, back there. Yeah.
How would you solve for sort of the Wall-E problem, for lack of a better word, where it's just one
Excellent,
word?
thank you, reference to Wall-E. Yeah.
But like where it's just essentially one word, but said, but the tonation is what kind of makes, explains how you're doing emotion. Can you do that in a written bot structure, and if so, how?
Ooh, that's a good question. All right. So how would you build R2D2? Who only can beep, boop, 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 back at you? Yeah. That's control of prosody. That's the control of pitch and speed of sound design. Prosody is one of the areas of synthesized speech that is least developed. Does anybody here work in the field of text-to-speech, TTS? Anybody? TTS nerd here? Okay, we'll put one of those too. All right. TTS is focused heavily on making parking meters understandable. That's great. So when I can hear your bank balance is $37, I get that, thank you. The state of the art in that field today is what you'll see in the Poly APIs in Amazon, Google's Voice, or Apple's Voice as well. And that's understandable, it is not apt. So the test I always use there is, could you build a TTS voice for a Muppet? Because Muppets have extreme range. Miss Piggy's my favorite in particular. And when she's like, oh, Curly, I love you, hi-ya! And goes all karate somebody else in general as a character, the breadth of that vocal performance is stunning. It's very broad. And there's nothing today that can generate that synthetically. You would have to design that. So if you want to get a sound designer involved, which we have at PullString, to do that, you totally could. And then what you would do, which is actually how Wall-E was done, and back in the very Star Wars film R2 is done, they actually write the dialogue as English in the script. That's handed to the sound designers, who will then translate that into R2 speak or into Wall-E speak. Build the sounds of that as if it was a different language with phonemes that are based on a synthesizer, not in the 40 phonemes spoken English, and then return the dialogue back to the process as a dialogue line. So it is as if you're designing a different language with a different set of basic sound constructs, which can be done, but that today involves a sound designer crafting that today. Yes, and they can build a PullString today. We've done it before, so yes. Over here.
First off, great presentations. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
You talked a lot about personification. One of the big things when it comes to chatbots is gender and how gender plays a role. So when you're talking about creating, obviously every single chatbot is different. Would you recommend that each brand have, 2 different gendered chatbots that you can then learn and they can have personalities themselves, or do you think that everyone should just kind of have one chatbot that doesn't have a gender? Like, how does gender come into play when you're thinking about
it? It depends on what you're doing in design-wise. I can imagine cases on both of those sides. There are certainly consumer packaged goods that I can imagine being, because of their nature and use, strongly male or strongly female. And there are many I can imagine that will be both. Okay.
How long
Yeah.
did it take to do the Bosco? The Bosco?
The Bosch skill?
Bosco, yeah. Amazon.
Oh yeah, for Bosch. Yeah.
The Bosch, sorry.
So the question, how long?
Yeah, like when I think about like, them being like, okay, here's what we want to do, and then from that moment to
okay, cool.
live.
Yeah, a typical project for us, I guess, will go in the short range, let's say 5 to 6 weeks of work. On the long range, about 10. Do you want to speak to that?
It was about 6 weeks. Yeah.
Oh, Danielle, by the way, works at PullString. Nice to meet you. And
It was
did
hard.
you happen to work on the module?
What?
Did you happen to work on the module?
I wrote it, yeah.
That's her. Yes. Yeah. You guys should chat up in the White House. All right. Was that the last question? Okay. Thank you all for your time very much. Appreciate it.